So first, let's say hello to Aaron Mate. Hey, Aaron, how are you?
Hello, Jimmy. How are you?
Now, everyone knows Aaron. He's an award-winning journalist. He was just recipient of the Izzy Award, the I.F. Stone Independent Journalist Award for his meticulous coverage of Russiagate. He works. He does the show Pushback for the Gray Zone. And anything else did you do something else that I should tell people?
I try to be the best person I can be. You know, that's what I do.
And I'll keep being me. All right, so here... So now I want to set the stage for this, right? So there's been a lot of malfeasance by the FBI in the Russiagate investigation that the Inspector General found, right? So the Inspector General did his investigation. He found out that they lied to the FISA court repeatedly over and over, that they lied. They even said that Carter Page wasn't working for them or the CIA when he was. They lied a lot. In fact, here's the Inspector General, what he had to say about that.
We found, and as we outline here, are deeply concerned that so many basic and fundamental errors were made by 3 separate handpicked investigative teams on one of the most sensitive FBI investigations after the matter had been briefed to the highest levels within the FBI, even though the information sought through the use of FISA authority related so closely to an ongoing presidential campaign, and even though those involved with the investigation knew that their actions would likely be subjected to close scrutiny. The circumstances reflect a failure, as we outline in the report, not just by those who prepared the applications, but also by the managers and supervisors in the Crossfire Hurricane chain of command, including FBI senior officials who were briefed as the investigation progressed. We believe that in the FBI's most sensitive and high-priority matters, and especially when seeking court permission to use an intrusive tool such as a FISA order, it's incumbent upon the entire chain of command at the organization, including senior officials, to take the necessary steps to ensure that they are sufficiently familiar with the facts and circumstances supporting and potentially undermining a FISA application in order to provide effective oversight consistent with their level of supervisory responsibility.
So that's the Inspector General saying that they screwed up from top to bottom. Senior levels of the FBI screwed up intentionally. These were hand-picked teams, and they did this. And they lied to the FISA court repeatedly, but overt lies and lies of omission. Here is Peter Strzok. He was the FBI guy who went to interview Flynn to get him thrown in jail. Here is what he admitted to being completely biased in his investigation. Here we go.
For context, Ms. Page said, not ever going to become president, right? Right?
So these are texts between him and Miss Page, which he was having an affair with, and they were texting to each other about how they're going to keep Trump out of being the president. And here's what he said.
For context, Ms. Page said, not ever going to become president, right? Right?
No, he's not. We'll stop it.
Repeat that again.
No, he's not. We'll stop it.
August 15th, 2016.
I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40.
On October 20th, 2016.
So that's the FBI guy who went to interview Flynn, caught at a text message saying that we're not going to allow Trump to be president. We have an insurance policy against it. And here we go.
I can't pull away and I defer to the chairman whether
you can just use one letter if you don't mind.
What the F happened to our country, Lise?
Okay, read it again that way.
Sir, did you not, was it not intelligible? You just want to hear it for me to repeat it?
Please.
Okay, sir. Sure. Happy to indulge you. I can't pull away. What the F happened to our country, Lise?
Why in the world do you believe that this committee should not ask for the record of similar...
Okay, so there's that. And so now what's come out most recently, a judge let us see the notes that were leading up. There's handwritten notes. You can barely see them on our screen. But then they typed them up so you could see, all right? So they released these notes from the FBI. And inside of it, the big thing that everyone keeps pointing to, I'll point to it here. It says, what is their goal? Truth/admission, or to get him, meaning Flynn, to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired. So they were going over there to try to get him, catch him in a lie. That's what the FBI does. That's what if you get caught lying to the FBI, even if you misremember something, that's a lie. They got you now, right? So when this came out, Donald Trump said what happened to General Michael Flynn, a war hero, should never be allowed to happen to a citizen of the United States again. CNN doesn't want to speak about their persecution of General Michael Flynn and why they got the story so wrong. They along with others, should pay a big price for what they have purposely done to this man and his family. Okay. So here's how Vox covers it. And now Aaron's here. He's going to correct every wrong thing they have in this article. So their headline is, the new Michael Flynn documents aren't the bombshell Trump is making them out to be. So just to tell you the story, after being fired from his position as head of the Defense Intelligence Agency by President Obama in 2014, Flynn cozied up. This is Vox's language. Flynn cozied up to Russia and became one of Trump's more prominent campaign surrogates. Do you know what they mean when they say he cozied up to Russia? Was that at that dinner that Jill Stein was at? Is that what they mean by that?
Yes, that literally means that he went to a gala to celebrate RT's anniversary. And so that means that he cozied up to Russia. And, and Flynn talked about cooperation with Russia, which I guess when you're a McCarthyite neoliberal, as is kind of a job requirement at Vox, you think that's cozying up to Russia.
Okay. So again, this is, when they say cozy up to Russia, that's McCarthy bullshit that Vox is doing, that most of journalists do nowadays.
It's pretty popular. It's
pretty popular.
Yeah.
The next paragraph says, Flynn planted the seeds of his own undoing before he even started the job by having secretive communications with Russian officials during the transition period. Now that's also, you tell me, Aaron, is that correct?
Well, what he did was he had a phone call with the Russian ambassador to the U.S., which normally would be totally fine. I mean, during a transition, incoming officials speak to foreign officials all the time. And if you look at the actual contents of his call, which there is a transcript of because it was wiretapped, and the only reason we know about it is because the fact of the call, not the transcript, but some aspects of it were leaked to the public. You'll see that there was nothing wrong except for actually one thing. The one thing that was wrong never gets discussed by places like Vox. Flynn was talking to the Russian ambassador for a couple of reasons. The one reason that gets talked about a lot is the reason that where basically Flynn told Kislyak that in response to new sanctions that Obama was imposing on Russia on his way out the door, Flynn said to Kislyak, listen, all we ask is you consider not responding in a way that escalates the situation because we're going to be coming in soon anyway. And the Trump team saw those sanctions that Obama imposed on his way out as a way to sort of help delegitimize Trump's victory because those sanctions were purportedly in response to Russia's alleged election meddling. So Flynn just said, whatever you do, we ask you not to escalate the situation. So, and if you respond proportionally. That's what Flynn said. Now, what he also said, and that gets no attention, is that Flynn also asked the Russian ambassador to veto a UN Security Council resolution that Obama was going to let pass for pretty much the first time. And it was a resolution being critical of Israel for its settlement building in the occupied territories. And what happened was, and this is the only documented collusion with a foreign government that we can find when it comes to the Trump team, the Israeli government and Sheldon Adelson asked the Trump team for their help in killing that resolution. And the Trump team, in collusion with Israel, tried their best to do that. And so Flynn was calling Kislyak to achieve that goal of having Russia veto that resolution, but Russia said no, and the resolution passed. But that's the documented collusion with a foreign power, and it never gets discussed because basically support for Israel and its government is bipartisan, except for that one instance where Obama let that one vote pass. And also, that whole story undercuts the narrative of collusion between Trump and Russia, because we're supposed to believe that Trump and Russia were really in cahoots, not Trump and Israel.
So, actually, the person that Flynn was actually working in collusion with and for was Israel.
That's right.
Not on the behalf of Russia, of Israel. And so, these kind of conversations that General Flynn had with Kislyak, which is the Russian ambassador, are normal. Those happen in transitions from one administration to another all the time. Is that what you're saying?
Those conversations happen all the time. The one thing that is not normal, I think it's pretty normal to say, hey, listen, whatever you do, don't escalate the situation. That's what he said when it came to the issue of new sanctions on Russia. What is not normal is him saying, hey, would you mind vetoing this resolution at the United Nations for us? I mean, that to me is worthy of criticism. I'm not sure if it's illegal. I mean, there is something called the Logan Act,
right?
But it hasn't been used. It hasn't been used since literally the 19th century. So it's totally arcane.
So we're going to talk about the Logan Act coming up. So here's the next paragraph from the Vox article. It says, at issue are newly released documents detailing how the FBI officials handled the key January 24, 2017 interview with Flynn, who at the time had just started his brief, ill-fated tenure at Trump's national security advisor. And just to let you know, they had investigated him already, Flynn, and the FBI hadn't found anything. And so it was Strzok who wanted them to keep this investigation open. The guy who was caught on his text saying, I'm gonna stop Trump from being president. That FBI guy. Okay.
Jamie, this is a critical thing to stress here, because what's amazing is that the FBI shouldn't have been investigating Flynn to begin with. They had no reason to. But even though they were investigating him and obviously found nothing, because they were looking into Russian collusion, there was nothing there. Even when they found nothing, Strzok intervenes to get them to keep the case open. And that just raises the question of why. There's a whole bunch of speculation. I have a few theories. But it's crazy to begin with that they're investigating Flynn. And once they conclude that there's nothing there to conclude with collusion, which was the obvious answer, Strzok intervenes to keep that case alive, which then leads to Flynn's troubles. And just to stress how dumb it was that Flynn was being investigated to begin with, I mean, you have to go back a couple of months. So with the IG report you mentioned, the Horowitz report, we learned definitively how the Trump-Russia investigation began. And it was because this low-level volunteer, George Papadopoulos, said something to an Australian diplomat about Russia maybe having something that could help Trump and hurt Hillary. And with the Horowitz report, we learned exactly what that tip from the Australian diplomat was. And let me read it because it's so stupid. And what makes it even more dumb is that they take that tip and somehow bring it to other people like Michael Flynn and Carter Page. So according to the FBI, the foreign government official from Australia said that Papadopoulos, quote, suggested the Trump team had received some kind of suggestion from Russia that it could assist this process with the anonymous release of information during the campaign that would be damaging to Mrs. Clinton and President Obama. It was unclear whether Papadopoulos or the Russians were referring to material acquired publicly or through other means. It was also unclear how Trump's team reacted to the offer. So look at that little passage there. First of all, the tip that the FBI gets is not that that Papadopoulos was told about stolen emails. It was only that Papadopoulos suggested the Trump team had received some kind of suggestion from Russia that it could assist this process. So it's totally vague, it's totally ambiguous, and they say it's unclear what the Russians were referring to. So on that basis of this low-level Trump volunteer saying he overheard something, they open up a counterintelligence investigation of a presidential campaign. And how do they get to Flynn? They don't get to Flynn with any concrete information. All they do is they go, okay, all right, so if the Trump team got some kind of suggestion, some kind of offer, maybe, then who else on the Trump team might be receptive to it? Well, there's Carter Page, who worked with the CIA before and helped us actually indict some Russian spies. There's Paul Manafort, who has some ties to Russia because of his work in Ukraine. And there's Michael Flynn, because Michael Flynn went to an RT gala. And literally, that was the basis for opening up separate counterintelligence investigations of all these different individuals. And that's why months later, when they get to early January, they're like, they realize they don't have anything for Flynn. They decide to close that investigation until Strzok intervenes.
So they had pretty much, the FBI was going to shut down their investigation of General Flynn to begin with. That guy Strzok, who we caught already saying he was going to, and by the way, Strzok was caught lying to the FBI himself many times. And of course, he never got prosecuted. But anyway, so Strzok keeps this investigation open, and we don't know why, but we're going to keep moving forward. FBI leadership was already aware at the time that Flynn had phone calls with then Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the presidential transition period. In those calls, Flynn advised Kislyak not to respond to, this is what you just explained, not to respond to new sanctions the Obama administration placed on Russia for interfering in the just completed presidential election. Intercepts of Flynn's conversation with Kislyak raised concerns with the FBI that Flynn had violated the Logan Act, a law that prohibits unauthorized citizens from negotiating with foreign governments. Now, let me tell you what the Logan... So where did that idea come from? It came from Strzok. So Peter Strzok, the FBI is going to close down their investigation. He says, wait a minute, there's this thing called the Logan Act that nobody ever fucking heard of, and it hasn't even been used since before the Civil War. He goes, I got this thing, we got him. So they go, okay, so that's what the Logan Act is. And so they're going to try and get him on a thing that's never been used since before the Civil War. And what he was basically doing was just normal stuff anyway. And if he did intervene, it wasn't on behalf of Russia or Trump. It was on behalf of Israel. Okay. The newly unsealed documents, which is why we're talking about this, which were released by Flynn's lawyer on Wednesday and are the first fruits of Attorney General William Barr's investigation of the Flynn investigation, indicate that FBI officials debated how to question Flynn about his contacts with Russia and whether their aim was to get him to admit any wrongdoing. So just so you know, there was the Russiagate investigation by the FBI and the intelligence community, and now there was the Inspector General's investigation of the investigation, and now William Barr is investigating the investigation, which they all should be doing, by the way. I encourage this. So in one handwritten note that Trump and his backers in Congress and on Fox News are trumpeting as a bombshell, Bill Priestap, then the FBI's head of counterintelligence, wrote the following. What's our goal? Meaning when they go to meet with Flynn, what's our goal? Truth, admission, or to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired. If we get him to admit to breaking the Logan Act, give facts to the Department of Justice and have them decide. Or if he initially lies, then we present him and he admits it. Document for Department of Justice and let them decide how to address it. Now, what do you make of this, Aaron, when they say, what's our goal in our meeting with Flynn? Do we want truth or do we want him to admit to a lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired? Is that significant?
Well, it's unprecedented. There has to be some sort of ulterior motive here because, first of all, they don't even need the truth. They have the transcript of the call between Flynn and Kislyak. So they know exactly what happened. So there's actually no information to obtain from Flynn here. There only can be some sort of ulterior motive to catch him in a perjury trap or to get him to admit to a violation of the Logan Act, I guess, which, as you say, it's never been used to convict an American. It's an arcane law. So for some reason, they want to get him. I can speculate as to why, but basically it's totally dirty, but yet this ends up becoming a huge plank of the multi-year Trump-Russia conspiracy because the fact that they then accuse Flynn of lying is then used by Russiagate propagandists to say that Flynn was covering up some sort of illicit quid pro quo between Trump and Russia. And it's all fantasy. It's all based on basically some incredibly cynical malfeasance on the part of the FBI here.
So Vox then says this. This is Vox's reporting on this. I'm not making this up. They say, none of this may seem like a big deal. It seems like a big deal to me. Does it seem like a big deal to you, award-winning reporter on Russiagate?
It does seem like a big deal if you're trying to ambush a national security advisor and you're keeping a case alive when you know there's nothing there. It does seem like a big deal. It shouldn't seem like a big deal to, I guess, someone who wants to stay in this fantasy that the Russia investigation was legitimate. I mean, which is kind of Vox's modus operandi. They promoted the Trump-Russia conspiracy theory for 3 years. So, and this is just an example of not being able to come to grips with documents that are right in front, even like the FBI writing down, let's try to, basically, in essence, let's try to entrap this guy.
And so what Vox is doing here is trying to diminish the importance of this, just like everyone did before with the Inspector General revealing that they lied to the FISA court repeatedly, and they lied about Carter Page, and they all downplayed that. James Comey tried to take a victory lap after that was revealed. And now they're doing the same thing. And here Vox is lying to their own readers about what's happening. They're saying this isn't a big deal. Well, obviously this is a big deal. This whole investigation was a sham. Strzok was obviously revealed for inserting his personal political beliefs into his investigation. He was been exposed for that. That guy has been exposed for lying to the FBI himself. And he never got prosecuted for it. He had more significant lies than Flynn did, and they didn't prosecute Strzok. Okay, so let me just go. Let me just read the rest of this. It says, none of this may seem like a big deal, but to Trump world, it's evidence that Flynn was set up by dirty cops who were already resolved at the early date to bring Trump down. That's exactly what this is, right? And they're saying that that's crazy. So what are you going to do? Believe your eyes and ears? Or are you going to believe Vox? Is this kind of like, this is what I'm talking about, journalism. This is everywhere. NBC does this. Vox does this. The New York Times does this. The Washington Post does this. Every place, BuzzFeed, Daily Beast, every place does exactly what Vox is doing, which is on purpose lying to their own readers to mislead them to do propaganda against Donald Trump. That's what this is.
Yeah, and there's a million reasons to find this objectionable. I mean, the intelligence agencies should not be politicized, no matter who the target is. And also, I mean, this is something I've tried to make clear from the start of my criticism of Russiagate is I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, or anybody else in that circle. I want to see them actually defeated. But I couldn't think of a bigger gift to them than to avoid the facts right in front of our faces, which are now becoming just increasingly more clear. But all this was pretty obvious from the start, that this whole investigation was baseless. It was rooted in a moronic conspiracy theory that Trump was a conspirator or an agent of Russia, and so were some of his other campaign officials. And that ultimately it would not hold, and when it collapsed, it would help Trump massively. And we've seen that. We saw that with the collapse of Russiagate. Trump got a big boost in the polls. We saw that when they tried to double down with Ukrainegate, and Trump ended that saga with his highest approval ratings ever. I mean, Trump has been so inept right now with his response to the coronavirus crisis that perhaps that could be enough in November to do him in. But certainly what has not helped is Trump's so-called resistance, as embodied by outlets like Vox, putting so much faith and energy into state-worshiping intelligence officials, peddling their lies and peddling their moronic conspiracy theory. And so it's just one reason why to oppose this and why it's important to grapple with the facts now, because Trump and his people are going to use this. I mean, and with justification, they're going to go out on the campaign trail and say, look at these people who tried to set us up. And it's going to play into a narrative that Trump has crafted for himself, where Trump basically blames everybody else for his failures to help the working class, which is what he promised to do. And one of his main excuses is going to be that, well, look, the deep state was in the way every single way. And he can point, I mean, even though, of course, it's been his choice to do things like the tax cut favoring the wealthy and to do nothing for workers. That's been his choice. But now he has a foil. He has a boogeyman he can point to. And he can look at all this genuine malfeasance that was going on and what they were trying to do to stop me. And so it's just, it's the worst of both worlds when you have Trump on the one hand being able to exploit this and outlets like Vox and many others completely ignoring what's right in front of them because it undermines the narrative that they bought into.
And so now you know why when Trump says fake news, it lands with more than half the country.
Yeah.
Because what Vox is doing here is fake news.
Yep.
What they did for 3 years was fake news. Russiagate is fake news. It was well, let's get to the next paragraph. So this is Vox speaking. What this effort to portray Flynn as a victim ignores is not only that the FBI already had evidence that he may have broken the law at the time the notes were written, but also that Flynn did lie to the FBI officials during the January 24th interview, saying that he and Kislyak did not discuss sanctions.
That's not even true. That's not even true. If you read the FBI notes from that, the 302, which has been released, Flynn initially says he doesn't remember. And actually, when he's talking to Kislyak, he was on a beach on vacation because it was like late December. He was on a beach in the Caribbean. He was drinking. He was a little tipsy. And then when he talks to the FBI, this is a few weeks later, if you look at the notes from their interview, at first he says, yeah, I don't really remember. And that's a pretty plausible answer, actually, especially since, by the way, he's not told that he's under investigation. He's not told that they're there because they're scrutinizing him. He thinks that they're having a conversation because, by that point, the fact that the call occurred had been leaked to the media, and so Flynn thinks that these agents are just there to talk to him about it because he thinks maybe possibly they're investigating Kislyak or something like that. He doesn't even know that he's under investigation, and in fact, these new documents that have come out show Lisa Page, the FBI attorney, basically brainstorming as to how they can avoid telling Flynn that it's a crime to lie. She talks about slipping it in there casually. So this idea that Flynn told this egregious lie is not even true according to the notes that these agents took. It's actually that Flynn couldn't really remember. And I challenge anyone, look at the notes and show me where, and look at Flynn's charging document, and show me where they actually clearly identify what Flynn lied about, because it's not there.
What do they say he lied about?
They say the suggestion, if you read the convoluted language in the charging sheet, is that he lied about he lied about not talking about sanctions and also about Israel with Kislyak. When really, if you look at the notes they took, all he says is that he doesn't really remember exactly, and his memory is fuzzy. Now the problem is he did plead to those lies, and this creates a problem for him. But the story of how he pled is now starting to come out more, where basically they threatened to also prosecute his son for something unrelated, and they also threatened to prosecute him on a much bigger deal on some lobbying violations, for Turkey that he hadn't registered for. By the way,
which he actually did, I think.
Which he did do, yes. But by the way, then they brought a case against his business partner, right? And Flynn was a witness in that, and that case collapsed because the judge threw it out. Said it was. I forgot the reason, but the judge even threw out that case because I think actually because it was flimsy. So even what they threatened Flynn with on this Turkey thing and whatever his son was involved with, if there was even something there at all, maybe they were just threatening him in the hopes that Flynn would just get scared. I don't think they had very much on Flynn, if anything at all.
All right, so let's move on. Of course, this is Vox. Again, this is Vox. Of course, Trump's allegation that bias affecting the Russia investigation were already investigated by the Justice Department Inspector General, who found it did not. Now, that's Vox. That's just flat up a lie. I showed you the video of what the Inspector General said. He said there were up and down. And I know we've covered it here. There are 17 different lies in their FISA applications. When
they use this line about Horowitz not finding bias, all Horowitz said is that no one told us that we were biased. Like no agent said to us,
Right.
yes, we were biased.
Right.
That's basically what his threshold was. Horowitz didn't make a judgment as to whether or not all these lies, the fact that they opened up this investigation to begin with on the most thin, ridiculous predicate ever, he didn't make a judgment as to whether or not that was influenced by bias. I think we can make that judgment, though, pretty clearly. He didn't.
So, I mean, this is a real news outlet, Vox. This isn't a YouTuber. This isn't some asshole at a blog. This is a $200 million NBC invested in Vox. That's what this is. That's what Vox is. Okay? And so now you know why people don't have any faith in journalism, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't. New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, Vox, NBC, they've been lying to you at a nuclear level since Trump was elected and before. Okay, we'll keep going. What we do know, this is Vox, what we do know is that Trump is lying about them. During a press availability on Thursday, Trump claimed that the notes show the FBI was trying to force Flynn to lie, which is what they do show. Right, Aaron?
Yeah, they have no reason to be there other than to get Flynn to lie or claim that they caught him in a lie, or to get him to admit to a violation of this arcane law that has basically never led to a single conviction of an American. So, yeah, that's exactly why they're there, is to get him on something.
So they say Trump claimed the notes show the FBI was trying to force Flynn to lie, but they show no such thing. All they show is that officials debated how aggressively and on what grounds to confront Flynn about his Russian contacts. Now, that's all garbage. We just revealed to you what the real point of this was. We revealed to you that this was all spearheaded by that guy, Peter Strzok, who's completely corrupt, should be in jail. He lied to the FBI several times that everyone knows about, right? That's not a secret. I'm not asserting that. He admits he lied to the FBI. We know about that, right? With Strzok admitted to lie to the FBI.
You know, it's actually escaping my mind right now. I'm not familiar with it.
Well, I found out about it when Peter Strzok went on 60 Minutes. And the 60 Minutes Scott Pally actually had to say, now he was himself caught lying to the FBI. And like, is this like...
Oh, that was about his affair, right? That was about his affair.
Was that it? Okay.
You're right. Okay, yeah. I think that was it. He might have misled some people at first about his affair with Lisa Page.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So now, how did the FBI agents get over to Flynn's office to talk to him? Because normally that's gonna you just can't walk over. The FBI just can't walk into the White House and start interviewing the head of national security. There has to be involvement. There have to be lawyers involved. What is the framework? What are you going to be asking him? What is the context of this? Just shit goes back and forth. None of that happened. Why? Because James Comey knew the Trump administration wasn't as savvy as another administration might be, and he could fuck with them this way. And you know how I know this? James Comey admits it. Watch this.
This White House now, and it's hard to imagine two FBI agents ending up in the same room. How did that happen?
I sent them.
It's funny. I sent these two FBI guys to go fuck with this guy. And, to try to trap him, ruin his career, ruin his family. All for what? I don't know what for. They don't like Trump. Flynn did something to piss off James Comey and the FBI. I think it was because he was working for Trump and they hated him. But here, listen to what he said. Oh, do you want to say something?
Well, I have a few theories. Flynn also was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency under Obama. And in that capacity, his agency wrote this report back in 2012, I think, that pretty much blew the whistle on the Syria proxy war that the U.S. was beginning to support. And Flynn's DIA pointed out that the so-called rebels in Syria, that they were dominated by Salafist jihadists, Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And basically, the inference of that is that the people who the U.S. would be supporting are Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And Flynn was apparently pretty vocal about that, and that angered some people. There were some other things as well. I mean, he has a reputation as having a bad temper, but I've always suspected that, given that John Brennan, who was running the CIA at the time when all this Russia stuff kicked off, that he played a critical role in it. John Brennan was also very heavily involved in the CIA program to arm and train Syrian militants. Timber Sycamore is what it's called.
Timber Sycamore, yes.
And so I've always wondered if some of this was driven by antagonism towards Flynn for being against it. Because, if you read Seymour Hersh, Flynn comes up a lot as someone who was sort of a countervailing force to what John Brennan and the CIA were trying to do in Syria. And there's other stuff too. And actually, there's evidence of efforts to entrap Flynn even before the Trump campaign. There's a woman named Svetlana Levona, who is a Russian-born academic living in Britain, and she was basically she was used by Stefan Halper, who turns out to be a FBI, CIA asset, a U.S. intelligence asset, to try to basically smear Flynn and make it look as if he was having an affair with her. And they leaked this to the media not long after Trump's inauguration. And the fact that she's Russian, the implication of the story was that Flynn was somehow compromised by this affair he was having with a Russian woman. And of course, it was all fictitious. It was set up in part by this guy, Stefan Halper. So there's a lot of really shady stuff going on towards Michael Flynn. We're not sure exactly why, but there's a lot of different clues.
So let's listen to the rest of James Comey. This is him talking about
White
how
House now, and it's hard to imagine 2 FBI agents ending up in the same room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration.
Something I wouldn't have done or would have gotten away with any other administration. He's admitting it.
Thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over. And so we placed a call to Flynn, said, hey, we're sending a couple guys over. Hope you'll talk to them. He said, sure. Nobody else was there. They interviewed him in a conference room at the White House Situation Room, and he lied to them. And that's what he's now pled guilty to.
So there you go. And as we've already proven on this show, James Comey is also a sociopathic liar who got his ass handed to him in that IG report. So much so that Chris Wallace destroyed him on his Sunday news show, which we chronicled here on this show. So anything else to add to this? Anything else I missed on this, what's happening, or that people should know?
Just there's one more document too that's come out that shows that Andrew McCabe, who was Comey's deputy, that he encouraged Flynn to meet with the agents without a lawyer. So it was an operation. They all took part in it. They stopped the investigation from being closed. They came up with this plan. We have the notes now. They plotted ways to avoid reminding him that perjury is a crime, so that they could basically not make him think that he was under investigation. And they have Andrew McCabe telling Flynn, yeah, don't worry about a lawyer. You don't need it. So it was, it was a setup, and I hope we find out why. I think I might have said her name wrong. So the Russian-born woman's name is Svetlana Lokova, and she's written about her ordeal, and it's quite interesting. She was basically used to smear Flynn, and they painted her as a honeypot and falsely accused him of having an affair. It's weird. There's a lot of shady stuff going on.
So I think now I might have misspoke too. Who interviewed Flynn? Was it McCabe or was it Strzok or both of them?
It was Strzok and one other agent.
Okay, so I did. So I was right. Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I was right. Okay, so there it is. It's one huge shit show from start to finish, Russiagate. And as soon as anybody did a little investigation into Russiagate, they find the FBI lying all over the place, nonstop, and doing garbage like this. And then you get garbage outlets like Vox with garbage reporters, whoever wrote that, lying, just flat out lying, pushing 100% propaganda as if we're in Russia 1980. And this is a state-owned. I mean, you couldn't get state media to do a better job than the corporate media did for the last 4 years for the establishment, right? I would you agree with that? Is that hyperbolic?
No, because the story is, I really think it's the dumbest story of all time. It's the most ridiculous political issue I've ever seen. It's so stupid on its face, this idea that Trump and his team secretly conspire with the Kremlin. Putin has a P-tape. They're communicating via secret servers, like via Trump Tower is going to out. Which, by the way, we just learned where that one came from. That theory came from a Clinton DNC lawyer, this guy Sussman, telling Christopher Steele that he had this theory that the Russian Alpha Bank was pinging the Trump Tower, and that's how they were secretly colluding. And that's why Steele included it in his dossier. And that's why for 3 years we had supposedly respectable outlets like the New Yorker magazine devoting a huge, massive story on whether or not that was true. Slate did it as well. You have people constantly talking about all this stuff on TV as if it's serious. And it was a giant scam. It was a whole scam.
I was on panels at the Young Turks where Cenk was touting that like crazy. The ping, the Alpha Bank ping. It was unbelievable. I'm like, this is what you're talking. It was. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I can interrupt you.
Well, it's just, I was going to say, like, the scam continues in that media outlets are scamming us into making us believe that they're serious when they won't have minimal accountability for pushing this joke for 3+ years. There's nothing. Very few people, basically no one has admitted, you know what, like, we got this wrong. Cenk, who I respect a lot and I really appreciate all the work he does, I would hope by now he could come clean and just acknowledge that, we got swept up in this. And the reason why it's important, we've talked about this, but it's worth saying it again, because any progressive who got enrolled in this ridiculous story was doing the bidding of the wing of the party that actually wants to destroy progressives. Russiagate was the way for the failed neoliberal wing of the party to keep themselves alive, because they should have suffered a fatal defeat in 2016 when an anti-establishment fraudster named Donald Trump beat them by claiming he was anti-establishment and pointing out their terrible legacy and record and saying he was going to reverse it, which of course he didn't, but their record was bad enough for them to lose the election. And Russiagate was the way they were able to hold on to power by basically blaming everything on Russia.
Yes.
And pushing this false hope that Robert Mueller was going to discover the secret hidden Trump-Russia truth and undo the Trump nightmare. And it was a scam. And any progressive who bought into it did the bidding of those forces that in the party that basically were doing this to protect their own privilege and to avoid a real reckoning that would have actually meant becoming a genuine anti-establishment party, because that was the direction Democrats should have gone in after losing in 2016. You had this phony anti-establishment candidate, so why not become a real anti-establishment party? But the problem is the people who had the party are the establishment. So they gave us this, and the people who got enlisted in doing their bidding should do some minimal self-reflection and own up to the fact. I'm not trying to shame anybody. I'm just saying is we can't let this happen again, where we have progressives advancing something that is not just helping Donald Trump, but is actually really destructive to the progressive cause and is propping up the people who want to destroy progressives and destroy progressive ideas.
I agree with you. We can't let this happen again. It is going to happen again. It already happened again. They went nuts with impeachment gate. Anything that it's Trump derangement syndrome, and it's a real thing. It's just like when the people at Fox News freaked out about Obama wearing a tan suit and a long form birth certificate. This is the exact same thing. It's the mirror as what's happening. And to Cenk Uygur, when he sat in here in my studio, he said that he doesn't believe in that theory, the establishment Russiagate theory that Trump colluded with them to the server and all that stuff. He has a whole other Russiagate conspiracy, which is that Trump is colluding with Russia through financial crimes. Yeah. And that Mueller didn't look at those financial crimes. And if he would have found that Trump, but that still doesn't have anything to do with the goddamn election, right? Which is what everybody's upset about. Did Trump have some shady business deals with Russia? Maybe. Does that have anything to do with the election? No.
Yeah, and and he didn't even actually have any shady business dealings with Russia. The only reason Russia is in the conversation is because neoliberal Democrats joined up with the national security state to use this as the way to bring down Trump, in part because they wanted to stigmatize Trump's rhetorical calls. I'm not sure how serious he was, but rhetorically, he was calling for cooperation with Russia. And that was anathema to people like John Brennan, who wanted to continue this proxy war in Syria that Trump and Flynn were saying that they were going to scale back, although Trump hasn't at all. And so that's why this whole Russia thing became invented to begin with, and this idea that Trump was compromised by Russian financial ties. Yet nobody can cite any concrete examples. Lawrence O'Donnell tried. Remember last summer when
and then he had to apologize to Trump.
And then he had to retract because he said a secret source told him that Russian oligarchs signed bank loans. And I remember Cenk was on doing a segment saying, "Oh yes, this is proof. Finally, yes." But of course, it was bullshit, and he had to retract it like every single other thing in Russiagate. So, I mean, the only financial ties that we know about Trump and Russia was that he did the Miss Universe whatever pageant there, and he tried and totally failed to build the Trump Tower in Moscow there. So even that whole thing there's no evidence for it, and it's just like a different variation of the same baseless thing. And by the way, I think I've said this on your show before, but if people care about financial ties to Russia, I personally don't. But if you think it's a big deal, then look at the Clintons. Bill Clinton was paid $500,000 by a sanctioned Russian bank to give a speech, to give one speech. And not long after that, Hillary Clinton, who was then Secretary of State, came out against the same sanctions that this bank was opposing too. So if you want to talk about financial dealings with Russia and a quid pro quo, the Clintons have a far more lucrative and documented financial tie to Russia than anything you can pin on Trump.
Well, the Clinton Foundation also received about $142 million around that Uranium One deal, which everyone says was debunked. That they debunked all that. No one fucking debunked that. That's bullshit. Oh, that who was that guy's name? Hostra? What, he just decided to donate $142 million in a very hard way to trace to the Clinton Foundation at that same time because he wanted to do charity, but he didn't know how to do it himself. So he thought he'd give it to the Clintons and let them go do charity because he wants to do so much charity. It's nuts. You're right. You're 100% right. The real financial dealings are between the Clintons. And by the way, where did the Steele dossier come from? It came from people in Russia. According to Steele was talking to people inside the Kremlin and got dirt on Donald Trump and then gave it. That's where the Steele dossier. That's according to Steele.
That's according to Steele. I wouldn't give Steele I wouldn't give him the benefit of the doubt, though. I don't believe anything he says. I think he's a fraud.
He could have made all that. I bet he didn't even call anybody in Russia. He just made all that shit up. It's but according to him,
yes,
that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's right.
So the exact thing that they were accusing Donald Trump with, colluding with Russia to get political dirt on their political opponents, was the exact thing Hillary Clinton was doing via Steele, a foreign spy, and they were paying him to do this. And then they lied about it for a year straight, and nobody got prosecuted for that. They lied that they were paying for the Steele dossier. They lied about that. For a year straight, they lied about it. No one ever talks about that. That doesn't end up in a Vox article ever.
No.
And so at the end of this, it always comes down to, so, like, you're the only one telling the truth about this again, right? Who else is to be? And Fox News is, right? So now Fox, well, again, how do you reconcile staying in this fucking profession when the whole thing is this? And my whole thing is, if, you know, it's like, hey, the Klan also gives away, turkeys on Thanksgiving, so they do good work too. You know what I mean? It's like,
well, but I don't work with the Klan, Jimmy. I believe in the idea of the profession of holding the power to account and telling the truth, and that's what I do. And I'm lucky I can do it independently. I work at the Gray Zone with Max Blumenthal, and Max is someone who shares the same values, and we're lucky. We get to do what we do independently. I think it would be very hard for me to tell the truth at pretty much almost any other outlet these days, because so many people, who do good work on some stuff, but then when it comes to the really dominant prevailing narratives on issues like this that touch on the interests of the national security state and democratic elites, they go along with it. So Russiagate is one example. Something we've talked about, Syria, and this latest scandal with the OPCW basically being caught covering up a investigation that found that the Syrian government was not responsible for a chemical weapons attack. And that allegation led to Trump administration airstrikes on Syria. And the evidence the OPCW investigators collected undermined the allegation, but yet nobody will touch it. The only place I can talk about it to a mass audience is on your show or at the Gray Zone. So we have a crisis, or we have a problem, a serious problem of credulity and cowardice and careerism in media. But I'm just lucky that I can operate a little bit outside of that.
Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?